Hello everyone, my name is Olivia, and I know that I should have posted this in August, but last month was just such a whirlwind, but I still wanted to recommend some of my favorite women in translation. August is Women in Translation Month, where we promote, read, and recommend some of our favorite translated books written by women, and I love translated fiction. It's a great way to expand your knowledge, your empathy, your mind, and to learn about so many different cultures and learn about so many different storytelling techniques all around the world. And some of these books are actually my favorite books of all time. They're all fantastic. They're all worth your time. So let's get right into it. Do you mind if I'm vulnerable for a quick moment? I was way too hot wearing that shirt. I just wanted to have it in my thumbnail because I thought it was really cute. So the first book that I have to recommend, I actually recently reread because I initially listened to it on audiobook and I thought that I didn't get as much information as I could have gotten if I had read it physically. So I decided to reread it and annotate, and I had a great time annotating this book. I feel like I highlighted it forwards and backwards and also had a conversation within the text. And the book is The Twilight Zone by Nona Fernandez, which is translated from the Spanish by Natasha Wimmer. This is set during 1984 in Chile during the Pinochet dictatorship. We follow a man who goes into a magazine office and decides to confess that he is the man who tortured people. Then we flash back to the future to follow our protagonist, who is doing a documentary about the Pinochet dictatorship, and she becomes obsessed with the man who tortured people. And we look at the man who tortured people through the lens of our main character's obsession with the Twilight Zone. And I think that the use of the Twilight Zone with the Pinochet dictatorship is such a fantastic melding of pop culture and history, because the entire premise of the Twilight Zone is breaking away from reality and entering a world where things don't necessarily make sense, whether it be through a science fiction lens, through an absurdist lens, through a surrealist lens. And Nona utilizes different episodes from the Twilight Zone to mirror that of Chilean society during the 80s, when things didn't necessarily feel like it was rooted within reality. Highly recommend. 5 out of 5 stars. I need everyone to pick this up. Another book in translation that I read this year that I fell in love with, that I definitely do want to reread eventually, is The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzburg. This is translated from the Italian by Francis and this is one of the best pieces of fiction that I have ever read. I read this in one sitting. A lot of these translated fictions are short. I wonder if it's because they choose to translate shorter pieces of fiction just because it's easier for the translator, or if people outside of America and North America in general just write shorter stories. I do think that America has an issue with not editing down their stories. I think publishing in America overall just has an issue with editing, which is a bigger discussion that I'm not going to get into. You could tell me if I'm wrong or right in the comments. I'm just kind of sharing my thoughts. But The Dry Heart by Natalia Ginzburg begins and ends with the matter-of-fact pronouncement, "I shot him between the eyes." We follow our protagonist, who is unnamed, who does everything within her power to impress the man who eventually becomes her husband. We see her center her entire existence around him, and once they fall into a marriage and they become husband and wife, we see their relationship slowly backslide and just devolve into one of absolute disinterest. This is such a fantastic exploration of a character's regression or a character's corruption into finally snapping and taking action. This is a fantastic exploration of the duties of a wife and a mother and a woman in society, especially during the late 40s and 1950s. This is just such a perfect exploration of what it's like to be a woman, to perform, and to have no one actually clap for your performance. And when that performance sours and becomes stale and eventually ignites anger within you, what happens when you eventually snap, and what causes this woman to snap? I cannot recommend this one enough. This is most definitely one of my favorite books of all time. This is just perfectly written, no notes. Natalia Ginzburg knew what she had to do and she wrote it perfectly. I feel like the first two books that I recommended were a little bit darker because I tend to like darker books, so I'm going to recommend something a little bit lighter. And we have The Full Moon Coffee Shop by Mai Mochizuki. This is translated by Jesse Kirkwood, and this is a book set in Japan where we follow a bunch of different characters, similar to that of Before the Coffee Gets Cold, where it's in different parts. So the Full Moon Coffee Shop shows up randomly to these people during a full moon, and these characters visit the coffee shop, which are run by these magical talking cats. And these cats are really fun, not only because they can talk to you, but because they know the perfect order that you need in order to brighten your day. And while these characters are drinking their coffee, they get some wisdom, especially like astrological wisdom from these cats who analyze their birth charts, who analyze the stars above, and kind of guide these characters who are all feeling down on their luck in order to move forward in their life and find happiness. And what I really enjoyed, not only with all that whimsy, is the fact that all of these characters are somewhat interconnected, so all of their stories intertwine and push the narrative forward, and it's just a wonderful read. It's very whimsical, it's very magical. It is perfect for people who love astrology. You not only get to learn about like the age of Aquarius, but you also get to learn about these different characters' sun and moon signs and how that can guide them forward in life. And it was just a really short, sweet read that I greatly enjoyed. This is like the perfect book to pick up during autumn time with a cup of coffee on a rainy day. It is the perfect pick-me-up book, and also like a perfect book to break a book slump because it's very lighthearted. I just fell right into the story. It was a very effortless read. So another dark read that mirrors that of a Twilight Zone episode is I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Harpman. This is translated by Ross Schwartz. We follow 40 women who live underground in a bunker. It says, watched over by guards, the women have no memory of how they got there, no notion of time, only a vague recollection of their lives before. It feels very much like a Twilight Zone episode because some episodes start out where the character doesn't remember their life before. They are just thrust into this new reality that's very nonsensical, that has no real answers, that makes you wonder what is truly happening behind the scenes. But one thing changes their lives forever. They are able to escape the bunker, and once they are outside the bunker, what happens next? This book is the type of book where I just want you to go in without knowing much about it. That's all you need to know. It is most definitely worth the hype. I had a great time with it. I was theorizing, I was wondering what was going to happen next. There were so many moments where I gasped because I was so in shock of the revelations that were happening. It was the type of read that kept me on the edge of my seat. This is also the type of book that makes you fill in the blanks with your own theories because Jacqueline Harpman doesn't answer most of the questions that she raises, and I really enjoy books like that. I love books that make me fill in the blanks, that make me theorize what the ending means, that makes me think of what the meaning behind the story is, because that makes my reading experience so much more enjoyable when I feel like I'm collaborating with the author to make my own conclusions. It's also a great book if you're a fan of the Dharma Initiative in Lost. That entire storyline, that's my favorite part of Lost. I think it's so fascinating. I think that they really should have focused more on that rather than everything else that happened in Lost. And I feel like if you love that aspect of Lost, you'll love this book. Another lighthearted Japanese novel that I would highly recommend is The Forest of Wool and Steel by Natsu Miyashita, and this is translated by Philip Gabriel. So we follow our main character, Tamura, and he is under an apprenticeship to learn how to tune pianos. So throughout the entire novel, he is going to different people's houses to tune their pianos, and he's also working alongside other more experienced piano tuners, and that's basically the entire story. And I know you're probably like, well, that's kind of boring, but it's so much more than that, because not only is this the art of the trade and follows this kind of profession that, one, is very unique, but two, is very hands-on and it is very delicate, because when you tune a piano, it has to be perfect and it has to be quiet. This is a very quiet novel that I think is perfect for wintertime, where it feels very soft and silent because the snow is surrounding you and it kind of muffles everything around you. And this is just a great cozy read to follow a set of characters who really know their calling in life. Tamura knows that he wants to tune these pianos. He wants to connect with these musicians. He wants to make a piano as best as it can be. And a piano is such a versatile instrument. There are so many different ways that people play it. There's so many different ways that people connect to the music, and so many different ways that people express themselves. And that's really explored in The Forest of Wool and Steel, similar to that of the Full Moon Coffee Shop, which really focuses on astrology and kind of finding your purpose in life. This is more honing in on your craft and more appreciating this piece of art that so many people have different relationships with. And I'm not a piano player myself, so I feel like I learned a little bit more about the complexities of piano tuning. I feel like I haven't spoken about this book in a while, but it was just a very quiet read that I appreciated. The next book that I have to recommend is Minor Detail by Adania Shibli, and it is translated by Elizabeth Jacquette. So this is split into two different storylines. One begins in the summer of 1949, 1 year after the war that the Palestinians mourn as the Nakba, and we follow a girl who is captured by Israeli soldiers and she is eventually murdered. And then we flash forward to present day, where a woman has become obsessed with this case of this missing girl, which was committed 25 years before the day the protagonist was born. This is another story where our protagonist isn't named, and I think those types of stories are so interesting because it's so much more than just the protagonist. You can place yourself within the protagonist's shoes, similar to that of The Dry Heart. I feel like The Dry Heart doesn't have a protagonist name because any woman's name can be replaced with the protagonist, because this is such a universal experience to be mistreated as a wife and a mother and a woman. And I feel like that's very similar to Minor Detail. We don't have the protagonist's name because it's so much more than the protagonist's obsession with this girl who was disappeared and murdered. This is obsession with injustice that happens on a daily basis for Palestinians. And this is another very short read that I listened to on an audiobook, and I thought the audiobook was so impactful that I had to get a copy for myself, because the narrative had this deep sense of urgency at all times. The pacing was both fantastic, but also kind of leaving you on the edge of your seat because you know something bad is going to happen, but you can't pinpoint when the needle is going to drop. And this is one of the few audiobooks where the story finished and I let out a gasp, because the way that it finishes is so brutal, so straight to the point, so sudden, that it just leaves you completely off guard. Another piece of translated fiction that will help you learn more about a country's history is The Mad Women's Ball by Victoria Moss. This is translated from the French by Frank Wine, and we follow two different women during the 1800s. We follow Geneviève, who is a senior nurse at an asylum that actually existed in the 1800s in Paris, and we follow Eugenie, who is a 19-year-old daughter of a bourgeois family that has locked her away because she claims to talk to spirits. And eventually their lives converge and are changed forever in a way that I'm not going to tell you. You have to pick up this book. This is another very short, quick read, very eye-opening into learning more about how asylums functioned in different societies. I have a deep interest in mental institutions. I think the way that they are structured back then are completely horrifying in a way that I want to bear witness to, that I want to learn more about. So being able to learn about the practices in an asylum in another country was very fascinating to me. It's one of those few novels that kind of lingers in the back of my mind, and there's also a book to movie adaptation of it on Amazon. I never got around to finishing it because one time I paused it and I had to do something else and I never got around to finishing the movie. But from what I saw, I think I saw half of it. It was very much faithful to the book. So I do highly recommend it, and I do have to finish it eventually if you're looking for a book to movie adaptation to dive into. A more lighthearted read that is comedic and feels like a soap opera and has magical realism within it is Like Water for Chocolate by Laura Esquivel, and this is translated by Carol Christensen and Thomas Christensen. I wonder if they are married or if they're just siblings. They're probably married. Like Water for Chocolate is one of those comedic soap opera-ish magical realism stories that are just such a comforting read. I feel like a lot of people either read this in high school or in college, and I read it for the first time in college and I greatly enjoyed it. So we follow our main character, Tita, who falls in love with a man named Pedro, but she's not allowed to marry Pedro, so he decides to marry her sister in order to remain close to Tita in any way possible. I have to read the synopsis because, again, I read this so long ago. Only a freakish chain of tragedy tragedies, bad luck, and fate finally reunite them against all odds. I just remembered having a really good time with it. I loved how relatable it was to having such a close-knit family where everyone is kind of breathing down their necks and kind of getting involved in Tita and Pedro's relationship, and how against all odds they cannot be together, and it feels like circumstances are constantly pulling them apart. And it's just a great classic piece of Mexican literature that I highly recommend. It was so cute, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. And the final book that I have to recommend, I am constantly talking about, and it is Thirst. This is written by Marina Yuskuk, and it is translated by Heather Cleary. What I love about it is that this entire book is set in Argentina. It's written by an Argentinian author, and we get to witness the changes of Argentina through the eyes of this vampire. And then the other perspective is set during the present day, and we follow a young mother who is feeling very isolated and lonely in life. And you may wonder, how do these two stories interconnect? But we follow these two women who are both facing very different but similar kinds of loneliness. When you're a vampire and you are watching the people that you love die because you live longer than them, you have this sense of loneliness where no one can truly understand you. And when you're a young mother and you feel isolated and downtrodden, you feel a sense of loneliness that nobody can truly understand because nobody's in the same position as you. And also, did I mention that this is a sapphic historical fiction vampire novel? Yeah. I feel like Chappell Roan should read this and then do like a vampire look. I think that she would kill it. I think it would be great. I love Thirst. It's a very introspective type of read. It's not necessarily a romance book. I wouldn't recommend it as a romance. I cannot stop recommending Thirst. I need more of you to pick it up. So that is the end of my Women in Translation recommendation video. I hope you enjoyed getting these recommendations, learning more about these stories, my thoughts about them. If you have any Women in Translation book recommendations that you would highly recommend that I pick up based on these that I recommended to you, please put them down below and include the country that they're from and also the genre of the book that you're recommending so I can figure out which ones to add to my TBR and so other people can get recommendations as well. If you want to follow me on social media, all my links are down below. If you want to join my YouTube membership to help support this channel, that will also be linked down below. And let me know if there are any other book recommendation videos that you would like to see from me in the future. I hope you have a good day, and I will see you very soon. Bye!